In a Maryland courtroom, Judge Maxwell Carter silenced Karoline Leavitt with a sneer, calling her a Trump puppet before a jeering crowd. She stood quietly, her hands steady, though every eye mocked her. No one knew she held evidence that could topple giants. How could one woman dismissed as nobody bring a powerful judge to his knees? Before we dive into today's story, if you find this video interesting, don't forget to hit the like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any upcoming stories. You're also welcome to leave a comment and share your thoughts. Every piece of feedback is truly valuable in helping Crossfire Justice improve. Thank you so much for always being with us. And now, let's jump into this thrilling and unexpected story together. The courtroom in Franklin County, Maryland, smells of polished wood and stale coffee, its high ceilings amplifying every whisper. Karoline Leavitt, a slight woman in her late 20s, stands at the plaintiff's table, her hands clasped tightly around a worn leather folder. She's here to challenge Liberty Fund, a nonprofit accused of funneling money to sway local elections. Her blonde hair is pulled back neatly, and her gray blazer, bought second-hand, fits just well enough to pass muster. She clears her throat, ready to speak, but Judge Maxwell Carter, perched high on his bench, doesn't give her the chance. "Save your breath. Trump puppet," he snaps, his voice sharp enough to slice through the room's hum. The gallery, a mix of reporters, locals, and suited attorneys, gasps softly, some chuckling under their breath. Carter's reputation as an anti-Trump hardliner precedes him, and his contempt hangs heavy in the air. Karoline's cheeks flush, the sting of his words landing like a slap. She's no stranger to being underestimated growing up in a small New Hampshire town. She was always the quiet kid who teachers overlooked. But this is different. The judge's sneer, the way he leans forward, his glasses glinting under the fluorescent lights, it's not just dismissal, it's a public shaming. She feels the weight of every eye in the room, some pitying, others gleeful. A bailiff, a burly man with a buzz cut, leans against the wall, smirking as if she's a sideshow. In the front row, a woman in a red scarf nods along with Carter's disdain, whispering to her neighbor. Karoline's heart races, but she keeps her gaze steady, her fingers tightening on the folder. That folder, its contents are her anchor, though no one here knows it yet. If you've ever been dismissed for who you are, not what you've done, this moment burns. Karoline wants to speak, to fire back, but something her father used to say echoes in her mind. Truth doesn't need volume. She bites her lip, swallowing the urge to argue. The judge bangs his gavel, the sound sharp and final, demanding order. "We're here for facts, not propaganda," he says, his eyes flicking over Karoline like she's a smudge on his desk. The crowd murmurs, some nodding, swayed by his authority. A young clerk, Emily, sits at a side table, her hands fidgeting with a stack of papers, her face unreadable. Karoline notices her glance, brief and uneasy, before looking away. The air feels thick, charged with unspoken judgments. But there's something in Karoline's silence, a weight heavier than Carter's words. Her calm posture, the way she stands just a little taller despite the humiliation, it's not defeat, it's restraint. The folder in her hands is more than paper and ink. It's months of sleepless nights, of digging through records, of chasing whispers about Liberty Fund. She's not here to shout. She's here to unravel. The judge leans back, smug, unaware of the storm brewing in that quiet woman across the room. A man in the back row, a journalist with a notepad, shifts in his seat, sensing something the others don't. What does Karoline hold in that folder? The answer is closer than anyone expects, and it's about to shake this room to its core. The courtroom in Franklin County, Maryland, feels smaller now, its walls pressing in as Karoline Leavitt sinks back into her chair. The leather folder in her hands is warm from her grip, its edges frayed from months of late nights poring over documents in her cramped Baltimore apartment. The buzz of the gallery reporters, locals, and a few curious retirees fills the air, their whispers like static. Some stare at her with pity, others with smug satisfaction, assuming she's been put in her place. Karoline's throat tightens. The sting of Judge Carter's words. Trump puppet still fresh. She's used to being underestimated, but this public dismissal in a room meant for justice cuts deeper. Her fingers trace the folder's seam, steadying her. Inside, tucked between pages of bank statements and emails, is a faded photo of her father, his smile soft but resolute. Truth doesn't need volume, Karoline, he'd said years ago when she was just a girl watching him stand up to a crooked union boss. That memory anchors her now, keeping her from crumbling under the room's judgment. Judge Maxwell Carter, his black robe stark against the oak bench, scribbles notes with a flourish, his face a mask of disdain. He waves a hand, dismissing Karoline's presence as if swatting a fly. "Let's move on," he says, his voice clipped, signaling the clerk to call the next item. The young clerk, Emily, barely 25, fidgets with a stack of papers, her eyes darting to Karoline for a fleeting moment. There's something in that glance, guilt, maybe, or unease, but Emily quickly looks down, her hands trembling slightly. Karoline notices, but she doesn't dwell on it. She's too busy fighting the urge to speak, to fire back at Carter's arrogance. If you've ever bitten your tongue when every fiber of you screamed to fight, you know this moment. Her heart pounds, but she breathes slowly, her father's words looping in her mind. She's not here to shout. She's here to wait for the right moment. The gallery's murmurs grow louder, a mix of agreement with Carter's dismissal and curiosity about this quiet woman who dared challenge Liberty Fund. A woman in a red scarf, seated near the front, leans to her neighbor, whispering. She doesn't belong here. Karoline hears it, the words slicing through her resolve like a dull knife. She's felt this before growing up in a small town, where her family's modest means made her an easy target for sneers. But there's a flicker in her eyes, a resolve that goes unnoticed by the crowd. She's not just a plaintiff, not just some small-town nobody. The folder in her hands holds more than legal briefs. It holds a story no one in this room expects. The photo of her father, taken at a community barbecue years ago, is her talisman. He'd fought for fairness, even when it cost him. Now, it's her turn. Emily, the clerk, shuffles papers, her movements jerky. Karoline catches another glance from her, this one lingering a second longer. There's something there, a crack in the girl's composure, but Karoline can't place it. Not yet. The bailiff, still leaning against the wall, shifts his weight, his smirk fading as he watches Karoline's stillness. Most people would have stormed out or snapped back by now, but her calm unsettles him. In the back row, the journalist, a middle-aged man with a worn notepad, jots something down, his brow furrowed. He's seen enough trials to know when something's off. Karoline's silence isn't weakness. It's something else entirely. The judge clears his throat, ready to move the proceedings along, oblivious to the shift in the room's air. He thinks he's in control, but Karoline's hands, steady on that folder, tell a different story. Why does that photo matter so much? The room doesn't know it, but the tide is about to turn. The Franklin County courtroom, with its heavy oak benches and flickering fluorescent lights, feels like a pressure cooker. Karoline Leavitt stands again at the plaintiff's table, her leather folder open now, pages fanned out like a hand of cards she's not yet ready to play. Judge Maxwell Carter looms above, his face flushed with irritation, his black robe giving him the air of a man untouchable. You're wasting this court's time, he booms, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. These accusations against Liberty Fund, a respected nonprofit, are baseless. Sit down, or I'll hold you in contempt. The words land like a gavel. Sharp and final, the gallery shifts, a ripple of unease passing through the crowd. A few spectators, unswayed by Carter's commanding presence, nod in agreement, their faces tight with approval. The woman in the red scarf whispers to her neighbor. She's just stirring trouble. Karoline's breath catches, her chest tight with the weight of injustice. This isn't just a courtroom. It's a stage where she's been cast as the fool. Her heart pounds, each beat a reminder of the months spent chasing leads, the late nights deciphering cryptic emails, the quiet promises she made to herself to see this through. She glances at Emily, the young clerk, who sits at a side table, her hands fidgeting with a stack of papers. Emily's eyes meet Karoline's for a split second, wide with something fear, maybe, or guilt before darting away. Karoline's fingers tighten on the folder, the faded photo of her father inside grounding her like an anchor in a storm. She remembers his voice, steady and warm, telling her stories of standing up to powerful men who thought they owned the truth. They'll push you to break, he'd said. Don't wait. She wants to speak, to lay out the evidence right now, but Carter's glare pins her in place. If you've ever felt the world daring you to fight but known it's not yet time, you understand her silence. The bailiff, a broad-shouldered man with a buzz cut, steps closer, his hand resting on his belt as if daring her to defy the judge. His smirk from earlier is gone, replaced by a hard stare like he's sizing her up. The air in the room feels thick, charged with the crowd's anticipation. Some lean forward, curious despite themselves, while others cross their arms, already decided against her. The woman in the red scarf mutters again, loud enough for Karoline to hear. She doesn't know her place. The words sting, dragging up memories of high school, where kids mocked her thrift store clothes, or the law firm internship where partners dismissed her as just a small-town girl. But Karoline's not that girl anymore. Her eyes flicker with resolve, though her face remains calm, almost serene. She's learned to wear her strength quietly, like a secret no one else can read. Carter leans back in his chair, his smug grin returning as he senses her hesitation. He thinks he's won, that his authority has crushed her. I'll give you one chance to withdraw your claims, he says, his tone dripping with condescension. Spare us this circus. The gallery murmurs, some chuckling, emboldened by his confidence. Emily's hands freeze on her papers, her knuckles white. Karoline notices, and for a moment, she wonders what Emily knows, what she's hiding. The clerk's unease is a crack in the room's facade, a hint that Carter's control isn't absolute. Then, in the back row, a journalist with a worn notepad and a cheap suit leans forward, his pen poised. He's been quiet until now, unnoticed by most, but his eyes are sharp, catching every detail. Carter's grin falters for a split second, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. He recovers quickly, banging his gavel. Sit, Ms. Leavitt, he orders. Karoline's pulse races, but she doesn't sit. She stands straighter, her voice low but clear. I have evidence, Your Honor. The words are simple, but they land like a stone in still water, sending ripples through the room. The gallery hushes, heads turning. The journalist's pen scratches faster. Emily's eyes widen, her breath catching. Breath. The bailiff shifts, his hand still on his belt, but his posture softens like he's unsure what's coming. Carter's face hardens, his fingers gripping the edge of his bench. Evidence, he scoffs, but there's a tremor in his voice, barely audible. Karoline's hands rest on the folder, her father's photo a silent promise beneath her fingertips. She could open it now, spill the truth across this courtroom, but something holds her back. Not yet. The moment isn't right. Something's coming, and it's bigger than this room. Will she break her silence, or is someone else about to step in? The air crackles with what's left unsaid. The Franklin County courtroom, with its tall windows casting slanted light across the worn carpet, holds its breath. Karoline Leavitt stands at the plaintiff's table, her leather folder open, its contents spread before her like a map to justice. Her hands, steady despite the tremor in her chest, hold a stack of bank statements, their numbers stark against the white paper. She's been waiting for this moment, through months of doubt, through nights when the weight of this fight felt too heavy to carry. Judge Maxwell Carter, his face a storm of indignation, glares down from his bench, his earlier smugness fraying at the edges. Your Honor. I have evidence, Karoline says, her voice calm but firm, cutting through the room's tension like a blade. She slides the bank statements across the table, each one showing payments from Liberty Fund to an account in Carter's name, hundreds of thousands of dollars, funneled quietly over years. The gallery falls silent, the air thick with shock. Carter's face pales, his lips parting as if to speak. But no words come. This is absurd, he finally shouts, slamming his fist on the bench. The gavel jumps, clattering against the wood. His eyes dart nervously, scanning the room for allies. But the crowd's mood has shifted. The woman in the red scarf, who'd whispered against Karoline earlier, now sits rigid, her hands clasped tightly. Karoline's heart races, but her face remains composed, her father's photo tucked inside the folder giving her strength. She remembers his quiet courage, the way he'd faced down men like Carter without raising his voice. These are verified by a federal auditor, she says, her voice steady, each word deliberate. The twist lands hard. Carter, the untouchable judge, tied to dirty money. The gallery whispers doubt creeping into their murmurs like a tide turning. If you've ever watched someone's mask slip, you know this moment, the sudden raw exposure of truth. Emily, the young clerk, sits frozen at her side table, her hands trembling as she grips a pen. A memory flashes late nights in the courthouse basement. Carter's curt orders to shred documents, his voice low and urgent. No questions. Emily, he'd said, his eyes cold. She'd done it, scared of losing her job. But now, as Karoline's evidence lays bare the judge's secrets, guilt claws at her. She gasps softly, the sound lost in the crowd's growing hum. But Karoline notices. Their eyes meet for a moment, and Karoline sees something there: regret, maybe, or a plea. She doesn't know Emily's story, but she knows that look. It's the look of someone trapped, someone who might yet choose to break free. Karoline files it away, her focus returning to Carter, whose shout still echoes in the room. The journalist in the back row, his notepad nearly full, scribbles furiously, his pen a blur. He's been covering courts for 20 years. Seen judges rise and fall, but this is different. Karoline's evidence isn't just a claim. It's a wrecking ball. He glances at the bailiff, who stands near the plaintiff's table, his earlier bravado gone. The bailiff's hand no longer rests on his belt. Instead, he shifts uncomfortably, his eyes flicking between Karoline and Carter. The crowd's whispers grow louder, some leaning forward, others pulling out phones to text or record. The woman in the red scarf mutters, "Could it be true her neighbor doesn't answer?" Her face pale. Carter's authority, once ironclad, is cracking, and everyone feels it. But he's not done fighting. "You expect me to believe this nonsense?" he snaps, his voice shrill now, betraying the panic beneath his bluster. Karoline doesn't flinch. Her gaze locks with Carter's, steady and unyielding. She's not here to argue, she's here to let the truth stand. The bank statements are only the beginning, a glimpse of the web she's spent months untangling. The folder holds more emails, recordings, fragments of a scheme that reaches beyond this courtroom. She thinks of her father, of the barbecue where that photo was taken, his arm around her as he said, "The loudest truths are the ones spoken softly." She's not shouting now, but her quiet strength fills the room. Carter's fist clenches, his knuckles white against the bench. He's cornered, and he knows it, but he's not ready to yield. The gallery watches, breathless, as Karoline's hand hovers over the folder. What else is in there? The courtroom braces for the next blow, the air heavy with the promise of more to come. The Franklin County courtroom, its air heavy with the scent of old wood and tension, feels like it's teetering on the edge of something irreversible. Karoline Leavitt stands at the plaintiff's table, her leather folder open, its contents now a weapon she wields with quiet precision. The bank statements she revealed moments ago still hang in the room's collective memory. Their numbers a damning thread tying Judge Maxwell Carter to Liberty Fund's dirty money. But Karoline isn't done. Her hands, steady despite the pulse hammering in her ears, hold a small USB drive, its black plastic casing unremarkable yet heavy with promise. She lifts it, her voice clear and measured. "Your Honor, I request the court play this recording." The words are simple, but they land like a spark in dry grass. The gallery leans forward, a sea of wide eyes and held breaths. Carter, his face already pale from the bank statements, stiffens, his knuckles white against the bench. "Objection," he snaps, his voice cracking, a raw edge betraying his panic. "This is inadmissible." The bailiff, who'd stood smugly earlier, now hesitates, his broad frame shifting as he glances at Karoline. Her calm, the way she holds herself despite Carter's outburst, stirs something in him, curiosity, maybe, or doubt. He looks to the judge, then back to Karoline, and steps toward the court's audio system. "Let's hear it," he says, his tone neutral but firm. Carter's eyes widen, his mouth opening to protest, but the bailiff's already moving. Plugging in the drive, the gallery murmurs, phones slipping out of pockets as spectators sense a turning point. Karoline's heart races, but her face is serene, her father's photo in the folder a silent tether to her resolve. She thinks of him, of the way he'd faced down injustice with nothing but truth and patience. This is her moment to do the same. If you've ever stood on the brink of changing everything, knowing one wrong move could ruin you, you know this feeling. The speakers crackle, a faint hum filling the room before Carter's voice, unmistakable, low, and urgent, cuts through. "Wipe all faith and family files when if anyone asks. Say they're lost." The words echo, each one a hammer blow. The gallery erupts, gasps and shouts blending into a chaotic roar. Emily, the young clerk, freezes at her table, her hands clutching a pen so tightly it snaps. Tears spill down her cheeks as she chokes out, "I didn't want to do it." Her voice is barely audible, but it carries a confession torn from her guilt. She looks at Karoline, her eyes pleading. "He made me shred them. I was scared." The crowd's noise swells, some spectators standing, others recording the scene on their phones. The journalist in the back row, his camera flashing, captures Carter's stunned expression, mouth agape, eyes darting like a trapped animal. Karoline stands tall, her pain from Carter's earlier insults replaced by a quiet purpose. She's not here to gloat, she's here to let the truth breathe. A woman in the gallery, a local activist with graying hair and a worn jacket, shoots to her feet. She's telling the truth, she shouts, her voice cutting through the chaos. Heads turn, and the woman's conviction ripples outward, emboldening others. The woman in the red scarf, who'd whispered against Karoline earlier. now sits silent, her face pale, her hands twisting in her lap. The tide has turned. Carter's authority, once a fortress, crumbles under the weight of his own words. But he's not ready to surrender. "These are fake," he screams. His voice shrill, his hands slamming the bench. He lurches to his feet, his robe flapping as he bolts for the side door, a desperate bid to escape. The gallery gasps, some shouting, others frozen in disbelief. The bailiff moves to follow, but Karoline's voice stops him. "Let him go," she says softly, her eyes never leaving the door. She knows something the room doesn't. Karoline's calm is a stark contrast to the chaos. She thinks of her father, of the barbecue where that photo was taken, his quiet strength as he taught her that justice doesn't need to chase. The journalist's camera clicks again, his lens now on Karoline, capturing the resolve in her steady gaze. Emily, still crying, wipes her face, her confession hanging in the air like a lifeline. The activist in the gallery starts chanting, "Truth, truth," and others join, their voices a growing chorus. Phones light up, the recording spreading online, hashtags already forming. Carter's footsteps echo from the hall, frantic and fading, but Karoline's focus is on the folder, on the next piece of evidence she hasn't yet revealed. The USB drive was just the beginning. The bailiff hesitates, torn between chasing Carter and staying to hear what comes next. The room holds its breath, the air electric with anticipation. Can Carter escape justice, or is something bigger waiting just beyond that door? The Franklin County courtroom, its high ceilings and polished wood now a backdrop to chaos, pulses with raw energy. The side door slams open, the sound sharp enough to cut through the gallery's roar. 2 FBI agents stride in, their dark suits crisp, badges gleaming under the fluorescent lights. "Maxwell Carter, you're under arrest for corruption and evidence tampering," the lead agent declares, his voice steady but commanding. Judge Carter, halfway to the door in his failed escape, freezes, his black robe tangled around his legs. His face is a mask of panic, eyes wide, mouth twitching as if searching for words that won't come. The agents move swiftly, one pulling his arms behind his back, the metallic click of handcuffs echoing like a final verdict. The crowd erupts, some cheering, others stunned into silence, their phones raised to capture the fall of a man who'd seemed untouchable moments ago. Karoline Leavitt stands at the plaintiff's table, her leather folder still open, its contents bank statements, a USB drive, and her father's photo laid bare like a confession of truth. Karoline's heart pounds, but her face is calm, her eyes fixed on Carter as he's led back into the room. The weight of months, years, really of fighting for this moment, settles in her chest, not as triumph but as relief. She thinks of her father, of his quiet insistence that justice comes to those who wait. His photo, tucked among the evidence, feels like his presence beside her. The gallery's noise is deafening, a mix of shouts and murmurs, but Karoline's world narrows to the scene before her. Emily, the young clerk, sits at her table sobbing, her face streaked with tears. She fumbles with a piece of paper, her hands shaking, and slides it across to Karoline. The note, crumpled and smudged, reads, "I'm sorry. I was scared." Karoline's eyes soften, her anger toward Emily's silence melting into empathy. She reaches out, her fingers brushing Emily's trembling hand. "I know," she says softly, her voice a lifeline in the storm. The journalist in the back row, his camera now a live stream to thousands, captures every second Carter's cuffed hands, Emily's tears, Karoline's quiet strength. Hashtags like Justice for Karoline and Liberty Fund exposed trend within minutes. The recording from Karoline's USB drive spreading online like wildfire. The activist in the gallery, her gray hair loose from its bun, stands again, chanting, "Truth, truth." The crowd joins, their voices a rising tide, the woman in the red scarf, who'd sneered at Karoline earlier, now sits silent, her hands clasped, her face pale with shame. The bailiff, his earlier smirk long gone, stands near the bench, his eyes on Karoline with something like respect. If you've ever seen a room turn, felt the moment when doubt becomes belief, you know this shift. Karoline's evidence emails, camera footage, and now the recording has unraveled Liberty Fund's web of influence, and Carter's gavel, abandoned on the bench, lies like a relic of his broken power. Carter, now cuffed and flanked by agents, struggles to speak. "This is a setup," he shouts, his voice hoarse. But the words fall flat, drowned by the crowd's fervor. His eyes dart to Emily, then to Karoline, a flicker of desperation in his gaze. He'd thought his authority was absolute, that a small-town woman like Karoline could be dismissed with a sneer. But she didn't shout or fight. She let the truth stand. And that's when the truth doesn't need to shout anymore. Karoline's gaze meets his for a moment, not with anger but with resolve. She's not here to destroy him. She's here to end the lies he's woven. The agents pull him toward the door, his robe dragging, his head bowed. The gallery watches, some still filming, others whispering about what this means for the county, for the courts, for justice itself. Emily wipes her face, her sobs quieter now, but her eyes stay on Karoline, searching for forgiveness. Karoline nods, a small gesture that carries months of understanding. She knows what it's like to be afraid, to feel small against power. The journalist lowers his camera, scribbling notes, his face alight with the story of a lifetime. The activist approaches Karoline, her voice low but fierce. "You've started something," she says, her hand on Karoline's shoulder. The room's energy shifts again, from chaos to a strange, heavy calm, like the air after a storm. Karoline's fingers brush the folder, the photo of her father a reminder of why she's here. But as her eyes scan the bench, she notices something a corner of a box, barely visible, tucked beneath Carter's abandoned gavel, what's left under that bench. The answer, she senses, will shake the system further. The Franklin County courtroom, its high windows now dim with the fading afternoon light, settles into an uneasy quiet. The chaos of moments ago, Carter's arrest, the gallery's roars. The FBI agent's swift efficiency lingers like a fading echo. Judge Maxwell Carter, his robe crumpled and his head bowed, is led away through the side door. The clink of his handcuffs a faint final note. Karoline Leavitt sinks into her chair at the plaintiff's table, her leather folder still open, its contents bank statements, a USB drive, and her father's photos scattered like relics of a battle won. The weight of months, of sleepless nights and whispered doubts, lifts from her shoulders, leaving her light but not unburdened. Her fingers brush the photo, her father's smile a quiet anchor. She thinks of his voice, steady through her childhood, telling her that truth, once spoken, carries its own strength. Her eyes glisten, not with triumph but with relief, the kind that comes when you've carried something heavy for too long and finally set it down. The gallery, still buzzing with low murmurs, watches her closely. Phones are lowered now, though some still record, their owners unsure if the drama is truly over. The activist, her gray hair loose and her jacket worn at the elbows, approaches Karoline, her steps deliberate. She pulls a handkerchief from her pocket, its edges frayed but clean, and offers it with a nod. "You did what we couldn't," she says, her voice rough but warm, like she's speaking to a daughter. Karoline takes the handkerchief, her throat tight, and dabs at her eyes. "Thank you," she whispers. The words barely audible but heavy with meaning. The activist lingers, her hand resting briefly on Karoline's shoulder, a silent promise of solidarity. If you've ever felt alone in a fight and then found someone standing with you, you know this moment, the warmth of being seen, of being believed. The journalist, his notepad tucked away, kneels beside Karoline's chair, his cheap suit creased from hours of scribbling. "I'm with the Baltimore Sun," he says, his voice low, respectful. "Your story, it's bigger than this room. I'll make sure it's told right." Karoline nods, her lips curving into a small, tired smile. She thinks of her father, of the community barbecues where he'd talk about fairness, about how one voice could ripple outward. The journalist's promise feels like that ripple, a chance for her fight to reach beyond Franklin County. The bailiff, standing near the bench, watches the exchange, his earlier skepticism replaced by a quiet nod. Even the woman in the red scarf, who'd whispered against Karoline, now sits with her head bowed, her hands still, as if reckoning with her own misjudgment. The room's air feels different now, softer, like the calm after a storm. A new figure enters, his presence shifting the room's focus. A senior judge, his silver hair neat and his robe pristine, steps through the main doors, his face grave. He pauses at the bench, his eyes scanning the gallery before settling on Karoline. "Ms. Leavitt," he says, his voice carrying the weight of authority but tempered with regret. "On behalf of this court, I apologize for the oversight. We'll conduct a full review of these proceedings." The gallery murmurs, some nodding, others exchanging glances. Karoline's heart swells, not with pride but with a quiet validation. Broken things still carry meaning, she thinks, her father's words weaving through her thoughts. She'd come here to expose Liberty Fund, to hold Carter accountable, Taid. But this feels like the system bending, if only slightly, toward justice. She nods to the senior judge, her eyes steady, her resolve unbroken. Emily, the young clerk, stands now, her tears dried but her face still pale. She hesitates, then points to the bench, her voice trembling. "There's something under there," she says, barely above a whisper. The bailiff frowns but moves to check, kneeling to retrieve a small, unmarked box tucked beneath Carter's abandoned gavel. He opens it, his brow furrowing as he pulls out a single sheet of paper. The gallery leans forward, the air tightening again. Karoline watches, her pulse quickening, as the bailiff hands the paper to the senior judge. The judge's eyes narrow as he reads, his jaw tightening. "This is a list," he says, his voice low but clear. 7 other judges, all tied to Liberty Fund. The gallery gasps, the sound sharp and collective. Karoline's resolve hardens, her fingers tightening on her father's photo. She thought this was the end, but it's not. It's a beginning. The activist gasps softly, her hand covering her mouth. The journalist's pen scratches again, his eyes alight with the weight of this new revelation. Emily sinks back into her chair, her confession now a bridge to something larger. The senior judge folds the paper, his face grim. "This will be investigated," he says, his tone leaving no room for doubt. Karoline's mind races, the names on that list, a new horizon, a new fight. She thinks of her father, of the way he'd faced down one injustice only to find another waiting. She's tired, God, she's tired, but she's not done. The gallery watches her, some with awe, others with curiosity, as if waiting for her next move. The handkerchief in her hand, the activist's gift, feels like a small, tangible piece of this moment. Is this the end, or just the start of something bigger? The room holds its breath, and Karoline feels the weight of what's to come. The Franklin County Courthouse looms behind Karoline Leavitt as she steps out into the Maryland dusk, its stone facade softened by the fading light. The air is cool, carrying the faint scent of autumn leaves and exhaust from the news vans lining the street. The crowd outside parts respectfully, their faces a mix of awe and curiosity, some still holding phones, capturing her exit. Karoline's hand clutches the leather folder, its edges worn but steady, the photo of her father tucked inside like a talisman. She pauses on the steps, her gray blazer catching the breeze, and whispers, "We did it, Dad." The words are soft, meant only for him. But they carry the weight of months, years of quiet resolve. Her heart is full, not with pride, but with a deep, aching gratitude. She thinks of her father's barbecues, his laughter, his unshakable belief that one person could make a difference. That belief carried her here, through Carter's sneers, through the gallery's doubts, to this moment where truth stands tall. The news vans, their antennas jutting like reeds, hum with activity. Reporters call out questions, their voices overlapping. "Ms. Leavitt, what's next? Will you testify again?" But Karoline doesn't answer. Her story is national now, her name trending alongside hashtags like Justice for Karoline and Liberty Fund Exposed. She doesn't glance at the cameras, she doesn't need to. Her victory isn't in the spotlight, but in the truth that's been laid bare. Inside, the senior judge's voice echoes from the courtroom, his announcement still fresh, a full investigation into Liberty Fund, a promise of reform to root out corruption. The gallery had murmured, some clapping, others nodding, as if the system, creaky and flawed, might finally bend toward fairness. Karoline's chest tightens, not with triumph, but with hope, a fragile, hard-won hope that this is the start of something larger. The activist, her gray hair catching the streetlights, steps forward from the crowd. "Keep going, Karoline," she says, her voice steady, her eyes fierce with pride. Karoline nods, her lips curving into a small, tired smile. The activist's handkerchief, still in her pocket, feels like a piece of this fight, a reminder of the strangers who became allies. Emily, the young clerk, lingers near the courthouse doors, her face pale but calmer now, her confession a bridge to redemption. The journalist from the Baltimore Sun stands nearby, his camera lowered, his notepad full. He'd promised to amplify her story, and already, online, people share Karoline's courage, their posts sparking debates about judicial integrity, about power and accountability. The woman in the red scarf, who'd whispered against her, is gone, perhaps wrestling with her own regret. If you've ever seen a community shift, felt the ripple of one person's stand, you know this moment, the quiet power of change taking root. Karoline's bag, slung over her shoulder, holds the box from under Carter's bench, its single sheet of paper a new weight. 7 names, 7 judges, all tied to Liberty Fund's web. She'd thought exposing Carter was the end. But this list is a new mission dawning, a call she can't ignore. Her father's voice echoes in her mind, the loudest truths are spoken softly. She's tired, her bones ache with it, but her steps are firm as she descends the courthouse steps. She doesn't gloat, she doesn't need to. Her victory is in the truth standing upright, in the system's first faltering step toward healing. The reporters keep calling, but she walks past, her gaze on the horizon, where the last light of day fades into dusk. Truth doesn't whisper, it's loud when someone dares to say it. And Karoline has said it, not with shouts, but with evidence, with patience, with faith. The crowd begins to disperse, some lingering to talk, others heading to their cars, their conversations alive with what they've witnessed. A young woman, maybe a college student, approaches Karoline, her eyes bright. "You're amazing," she says, then ducks away, embarrassed. Karoline smiles, the gesture small but genuine. She thinks of her father, of the way he'd listen to people. Really listen, and make them feel seen. That's what she wants now, not fame, but connection, the kind that builds something better. The senior judge's promise of reform, the activist's fierce encouragement, Emily's tearful note, they're all pieces of a larger fight, one Karoline knows she'll carry forward. The box in her bag feels heavier now. Its name's a challenge, a responsibility. She adjusts the strap, her steps steady as she moves toward the street. The news van's fading into the background. The fight isn't over, but for now, justice feels like enough, a quiet strength that lingers like the dusk around her. Karoline's hand rested on the worn folder, her father's photo still warm against her palm. The courthouse steps were empty now, but the dusk felt alive, whispering of battles yet to come. Justice didn't roar. It settled like dust after a storm. Could one woman's quiet stand ripple beyond this night sometimes? The truest strength is in carrying on, not for applause, but for the truth that refuses to stay silent.